I don't know if minimalist horror is a thing. My internet searches were scattered at best, but let's talk about it. Every time a patron suggests a video idea, I always end up changing it somehow. So Colleen originally asked me to do a video on like horror movies where you've got like one protagonist, like one person for like the whole movie pretty much. And that kind of led me down a rabbit hole of what I would call like minimalist horror movies. And I feel like that could include many different definitions, like one location horror, horror movies with a super simple premise, movies with very few characters, like Colleen had said. And as I was thinking about this concept, a couple of movies came to mind that I feel like would fit this category of minimalist horror. So I figure I would list out my favorites. As usual, these are in no particular order, but I'll save my most favorite for last. Reality and fantasy begin to blur when an isolated teenager immerses herself in an online role-playing game in We're All Going to the World's Fair. Aside from being one of the most unique coming-of-age stories I've ever seen, the cerebral nature of this horror movie makes it perfect for the like minimal category. Casey is super isolated in her home and she spends most of her time online playing this role-playing horror game. The dread is simple and quiet and very realistic, especially when you think about the dangers of putting yourself out there online, saying that as somebody who puts themselves out there online. And when you boil it down, the story is really simple. It's just stretched over a longer period of time and it's quite the experience. All right, next up, in a post-apocalyptic world, a family's fragile existence is threatened when they take in strangers seeking refuge from a deadly virus, and it comes at night. I feel like the core of minimal horror is taking the simple things that frighten us on like a molecular level, and the fear of the dark is the fear since it comes from a desire to survive, and to survive you need to be able to protect yourself against threats, which is easier when you can see them. The poster alone gives me the shiver. Nothing wigs me out more than when Daisy goes all alert and stares off into the trees just beyond my backyard fence. It always makes me think about this movie. And this feels a little scarier watching it now, knowing it came out a few years before COVID, because I think you could like re-release this movie now as like a post-pandemic kind of movie and it would work extremely well. But you can't really get more simple than the horror of a virus that you don't fully understand. It's simple in that it makes you afraid of the outside world, which kind of seems like a simple fear, but when you think about it, it has a multitude of horrors behind it. A videographer answers a Craigslist ad and encounters a mysterious client whose intentions quickly turn sinister in Creep. Yes, I feel like Creep would fall under this minimalist horror category. The premise is simple enough, the scares are simple enough as well, because it's ultimately just about the fear of strangers, the fear of other people, the fear of not really knowing a person and what they are capable of until it's too late. Nothing supernatural is going on, but by the time Aaron realizes he's in over his head, it's far too late. And the way Mark Duplass plays Joseph, his quick change in demeanor and his erratic behavior make this frightening simply because this could happen with anyone at any time. Someone could just snap. Next on my list is I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, in which a young nurse caring for an elderly author in a haunted house begins to experience eerie occurrences and suggests a connection to the author's most famous novel. Now, I don't necessarily think that all haunted house stories would fall under minimalist horror, but they have the potential. The horror is, again, simple. Home is supposed to be where you're safe and comfortable, and anything that threatens that is frightening, especially when you can't pinpoint what the danger is. I Am the Pretty Thing relies on a good ghost story, the mystery of a suspicious death, and just vibes. Somehow I have decided a good minimalist horror relies on tension building and dread rather than jump scares, and this movie only has one jump scare. The rest just seeps into your bones and stays there. 3 student filmmakers disappear while investigating the legend of the Blair Witch in the Maryland woods, leaving behind only their footage. You know what it is? The Blair Witch Project. Possibly one of the best minimalist horror movies out there. Like being lost in the woods with something you don't know what after you. It doesn't get more simple. It doesn't get more scary. If you told me a bunch of legends about a witch and then tossed me into the woods, I'd probably scare myself to death on the first night. Like the sounds alone would send me into cardiac arrest. Blair Witch proves the scariest thing is your own mind and what it can conjure under the right circumstances. And I've never been so scared by a movie where not a lot happens with the exception of one other film. My ultimate favorite minimal horror movie follows two children who wake up in the middle of the night to find their father is missing and all the windows and doors in their home have vanished. Yep, Skinamarink. What the hell happens in that movie? Damn near nothing. But fuck if it isn't one of the scariest things I've seen in my entire life. The movie proved you can barely show anything, barely say anything, and just all around be the most barren film and still be incredibly frightening. Director Kyle Edward Ball really just said, I'm gonna let your imagination do the work here. And I think that's the essence of minimalist horror movies. Storylines so simple that your brain takes over and fills in the gaps. So is minimalist horror a thing? Maybe. It could just be a different way to describe other established subcategories of horror. In the attempts I made trying to search for a definition, leave it amorphous at best. But I would love to hear your take on this in the comments below. And if you like this video, you can check out my list of favorites from a more established subgenre of horror, eco-horror. I'll leave that right there for you. And I will see you next week with new videos. Until then, stay strange. Bye.